Yo, what is good, everyone? Welcome to the Fantasy Football Prodigy Podcast. My name is Tyler Anderson. I am your host. The date is Friday, December 19th. I'm recording this at about 8 p.m. Central Time. So by the time I get it posted and exported and everything, it'll be late Friday or maybe even early Saturday. But we're in week 16 of the Fantasy Football Playoffs. So here at the Fantasy Football Prodigy, we are trying to get your lineups looking right for the semifinal matchup for most leagues, unless you're in a week 18 championship, which if you are, talk to your commissioner to get that changed to week 17 moving forward. So make sure you are followed, make sure you're subscribed wherever you're enjoying the podcast so that you can become a Fantasy Football Prodigy. If you want the video version of the podcast, I don't know why you would, unless you want to see my friend Gingy back there, but head over to YouTube, look up Fantasy Football Prodigy, and look at my ugly mug. Talk ball. We've got the green and black logo. We're gonna recap the week 16 Thursday night football game, get into my starts of the week, most importantly, and then preview the rest of the games for the week. So I think we're gonna begin with our starts of the week. I know that's a fan favorite. And if you do ever just want the starts of the week, you don't want the long form, blabber, yada, yada, yada. You can head over to I post the shorts on my YouTube also, but obviously TikTok's the big one. The Fantasy Football Prodigy, DA Fantasy Football Prodigy. That's kind of where it's popping. So we're going to get into my starts of the week. We're going to start at the quarterback position, and let's get right into it. Quarterback start of the week, Jacoby Brissett of the Arizona Cardinals at home against the Atlanta Falcons. Jacoby Brissett has been a top 12 quarterback every single week since he took over as the starter in Arizona in week 9. That's 7 straight weeks of quarterback one production, even last week in a terrible matchup with the Houston Texans. I think he makes it 8 straight weeks in week 16 as he gets to take on a Falcons defense that is the 4th best schedule adjusted matchup for quarterbacks over the last 8 weeks. This game has a nice 48.5 point over under, which we love for fantasy. Jacoby also has awesome pass catchers to throw the ball to. Tight end Trey McBride is having a historically great season. Wide receiver Michael Wilson has been super hot lately, and I love him as a start this week as well, especially if wide receiver Marvin Harrison Jr. is out. I like Jacoby Brissett as a low to mid quarterback one in week 16. Moving on to the running back position. Running back start of the week. The starting running back of the Houston Texans at home against the Las Vegas Raiders. The Texans are 14.5 point favorites at home against a defense that is the 3rd best schedule adjusted running back matchup over the last 5 weeks. They should be able to run the ball effectively and often in this matchup and game environment, but we just need clarity on health to determine which player to start. If Woody Marks is good to go, he would be a great running back 2 start. If Woody is out and Nick Chubb is the starter, Chubb becomes a solid flex play. If both Woody and Chubb are out, Jawar Jordan, who had 100 rushing yards last week, becomes an intriguing flex option. Monitor the news on this running back room as we get closer to game time, but I like the Texans starting running back as a solid play in week 16. Moving on. Wide receiver start of the week, Jawan Jennings of the San Francisco 49ers on the road against the Indianapolis Colts. While his yardage production has been modest, Jennings is the wide receiver 18 in points per game since week 9, largely on the back of touchdowns, having scored in 5 of their last 6 games. Fellow wide receiver Ricky Pearsall is questionable with a knee injury, and regardless of if he is active or not, I think Jennings will lead the way as the team's wide receiver 1. You're hoping for a touchdown, but against a depleted Colts secondary that has been the 5th best schedule-adjusted matchup for wide receivers over the last 5 weeks, he might even have a nice yardage floor. I like Jawan Jennings as a high wide receiver 2 in week 16. And then finally, Tight end start of the week, Dallas Goedert of the Philadelphia Eagles on the road against the Washington Commanders. Goddard is surprisingly the tight end 4 on the year, which actually makes sense because I traded him away in Dynasty before the season. His production has been inconsistent, but that's most tight ends outside of that absolutely elite tier. While he has a low floor each week, Goddard has one thing most tight ends lack in fantasy: upside. Goddard has 4 games with over 15 fantasy points this season, and he's been the tight end 1 overall twice. He's actually being used near the goal line for a change, and he has already crushed his previous career high touchdown mark of 5 with 9 touchdowns on the season and counting. This week, he gets a great matchup with the Commanders, who have given up tight end production all season and are the second easiest schedule adjusted matchup for the position over the last 8 weeks. He has a low floor, and you'll likely need a touchdown to be happy, but if you don't have a locked-in elite option, I like Dallas Goedert as a mid tight end 1 in week 16. Those are my tight end starts of the week. Well, I guess my starts of the week across all positions. They're locks. Goddard, little touchdown dependent. Jennings is also touchdown dependent, but I think they come this week. So let's do a quick recap of the Thursday night game in Seattle. The Seahawks hosted the Rams. Epic comeback by the Seahawks. Scored 16 points in the fourth quarter. 2-point conversions. 3 straight 2-point conversions. 2 in the fourth quarter and then 1 in overtime to get the win. But the Seahawks get the win 38-37. If you didn't watch that game, you honestly watch the replay, even if you know the outcome, because it was awesome. Probably the game of the year, in my opinion. The Seahawks were trailing. They outscored the Rams 16-7 in the fourth quarter to tie it up. Obviously 16 points. They got 2-point conversions. And then in overtime, the Rams scored a touchdown. The Seahawks got the ball back. They scored a touchdown. They went for 2 and they got it. Epic scenes. Lots of fantasy production here. Matthew Stafford probably on a lot of benches. I know I had him on a bench for Jalen Hurts this week. Stafford has been great, but in Seattle, no Devontae Adams in this matchup. The Seahawks are a tough defense on the road against the 12th man. I was kind of hesitant, that Stafford was going to be good, much less have upside, but he had 457 yards and 3 touchdowns. So if you started him, congratulations. That's a great start to the week. Sam Darnold on the other side had 270 and 2, also 2 interceptions. Puka Nacua, ref comment controversy aside, he went 12 for 225 and 2 touchdowns. JSN 8 for 96 and a touchdown for Seattle. A lot of production came in that fourth quarter and overtime, and it was just great if you had one or both of those guys. I have both of them in my guillotine league, so off to a great start there in the final 3 in that league. Very excited about that. For the Rams, Xavier Smith was 2 for 57, and then I had never heard of this guy, but Kanata Mumpfield had 8 targets. He was 3 for 40, but he was kind of operating almost as like he was their second leading target behind Puka, who had 16 targets. But and if you started Kobe Parkinson at tight end for the Rams, you were definitely disappointed. At the last minute, I picked him up and started him over Darren Waller. Waller has a great matchup with the Bengals. We'll talk about him later, but they benched Tua. You got a 7th round rookie coming in. So I was like, I'm going to go with Parkinson. He's been hot. He's been scoring. And Devontae Adams is out. So maybe he'll have a goal line opportunity. He only had 4 targets, 2 for 21. The other tight ends there out yardaged him. Terrence Ferguson had 4 targets as well. Turned into 3 for 33, and he got the touchdown. And then Davis Allen had 5 targets, turned into 2 for 34. So for Seattle, really no good receivers outside of JSN. AJ Barner was 4 for 49 and a touchdown on 6 targets. So he was a solid tight end streaming option if you played him. Cooper Kupp was 3 for 39 on 4 targets in a revenge game. Also had a brutal fumble. And then, in terms of running backs, Kyron Williams for the Rams, 23 for 70, no touchdowns. Blake Corum had the touchdown to go along with 14 for 48 on the ground. Corum also added 1 catch for 13 yards. Kyron had 3 catches for 15 yards. And then for Seattle, Kenneth Walker had a big game. I thought about putting him in a DFS lineup, and I opted not to, and I regret that. He was 11 for 100 and a touchdown on the ground, and he was also the second leading receiver on the team for Seattle, 3 for 64 on 3 targets. So only 14 opportunities, but he had 164 yards and a touchdown. Charbonnet, only 9 for 32 on the ground, 4 for 22 through the air on 4 targets, but he had a rushing touchdown, so he was good. And then Rashid Shaheed, only 1 target, no catches, but he had an epic punt return to kind of get the momentum for Seattle. And he also had 1 carry for 31 yards. So crazy game. Lots of fantasy goodness. I had Stafford on a bench and I started Parkinson. So those were the only kind of disappointing things from my perspective. But Puka, 225 and 2 in my guillotine league with JSN. He had like nothing in I think he had 0 catches in the first half. JSN did, and he came back and had a solid week. So moving on to the rest of the matchups, looking forward instead of behind, we have 2 Saturday games. We got the Eagles at Washington Commanders, and then the Green Bay Packers at the Chicago Bears. So let's start with the 9-5 Eagles traveling to take on the 4-10 Commanders. The Eagles are 7-point road favorites. The over-under is 44.5. Lane Johnson and Jalen Carter are out for this game for the Eagles again. The Eagles offense has looked pretty bad lately, but I think you're kind of starting your studs here. Jalen Hurts. I put him in my lineup over Stafford. And in this matchup, the Commanders are the 5th best quarterback matchup over schedule adjusted over the last 8 weeks. And for the duration of this video, I'm going to be talking about schedule adjusted matchups just so I don't have to say schedule adjusted every time. And I'll be using DraftKings for my NFL lines. So the lines might be different depending on where you look, but Jalen Hurts is a high quarterback 1. I'd start him over pretty much everyone except for like Josh Allen and Stafford in hindsight. Saquon Barkley is a great start. I know it hasn't been the year that we wanted. The Commanders are the 6th best matchup over the last 8 weeks for running backs. And Saquon, he gets volume. He's a threat to score, and he's a talented player. So he's a mid running back 1. A.J. Brown, you are probably starting him. I know he was kind of inconsistent to start the year, but the Commanders, they're a bad defense. And A.J. Brown is a mid wide receiver 1. Last week, only 2 catches on 2 targets, but it was for 41 and a touchdown. He's always a big play guy, and he's been really solid over the last 4 weeks. He's been good to great. So you're starting him. And then Devontae Smith is the only other question here. It's been pretty inconsistent for him this year. 3 straight disappointing weeks. Really, 3 straight bad weeks. He was 6 for 89 on 11 targets in week 12 against Dallas, the best matchup for receivers in the world. And then the week before that, only 1 for 8. So he hasn't had a really good week since he was 4 for 69 and a touchdown in week 10 coming out of the bye against the Packers. So not a must start. He's still in the wide receiver 2 range, probably more of a low wide receiver 2, just because of the matchup, and he's a good player. But if the team doesn't need to throw the ball a lot, it might limit his upside, especially because my start of the week tight end Dallas Goedert is getting in the end zone, baby. So it's the playoffs. There's no bye weeks. So if you're still in the playoffs, you might not have to start Devontae Smith. Maybe you do, but you might not have to. He could have a good week, but it's a little. If he doesn't have a good week, I wouldn't be shocked. Laramie Tunsil is out at tackle for the Commanders, and obviously Jane Daniels. Not obviously, maybe you haven't heard, but he's shut down for the year. He came back for 1 week against my Vikings, just for me to start him and have him leave early after doing literally nothing for fantasy. So Marcus Mariota has turned into a solid streamer throughout the season. In this matchup against the Eagles, I would be looking elsewhere. They're the 3rd toughest matchup for quarterbacks. And then in this running back room, Chris Rodriguez, I think would have been a good start last week against the Giants, but he was out. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt kind of stepped in as the starter and had a great week. I think Chris Rodriguez should be playing. So I wouldn't want to start him, though, in this matchup. I liked the Commanders starter last week against the Giants, but this week, as an underdog against a really tough defense, I probably would be looking elsewhere. outside of Rodriguez. I wouldn't start Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. I would be starting Rodriguez if I had to start anyone, but more of like a running back 4, maybe running back 3. And then at receiver, Terry McLaurin, you can start him. If you told me he had like a bad game, I wouldn't be surprised, given, not having Daniels, and the Eagles are the toughest matchup for wide receivers over the last 8 weeks. But McLaurin, he can make plays down the field, and he's talented. So he's still a low-end wide receiver 2, maybe a high wide receiver 3, depending on your preference. But, if you want to get away from him, I wouldn't blame you. And then Deebo Samuel, unless he happens to get in the end zone, I think you're going to be disappointed. It's been pretty rough for him lately. He started the year pretty hot, and he's had a couple good games since he came back from injury in week 8. He's had 2 usable fantasy games, and even those weren't great. So he's a wide receiver 3, but he can always make a play after the catch, but I would not want to start him. And then I have to start him in a league probably, but I don't like it. It's in the range of outcomes that he has a decent game, but probably not. And then I'm not starting any tight ends for the Commanders, especially in this matchup. Obviously, Zach Ertz is out for the year if you didn't hear, with a torn ACL. So moving on to the other Saturday game, we got the 9-4-1 Packers traveling to take on the 10-4 Bears. The Packers just got a win over the Bears. What was that, a couple weeks ago? Let me see. Week 14. We're in week 16 now. So Packers just won over the Bears 28-21 in Green Bay. This game is in Chicago. And the Bears are 1.5 point favorites. So very close line. And 46.5 point over under. So in terms of Packers players, Josh Jacobs is questionable. If he's good to go, you're starting him. No questions asked. If he doesn't play, Emmanuel Wilson is the handcuff that you want there. And then Jordan Love, he's kind of probably a high quarterback 2. Having, now that we know Stafford had a great week, and we know that Darnold had a pretty good week as well, he's probably in that high quarterback 2 range against the Bears. But if Jacobs is active, you're playing him. And then in terms of wide receivers, the Bears are the second best schedule adjusted matchup over the last 8 weeks. So whether it's Watson or Jaden Reed, one of these guys has potential to have a decent game here. Christian Watson is questionable. Before he was dealing with this injury stuff, he was really, really kind of lighting it up. It's a good matchup. So if he is active and good to go, you could take a shot on him. But with the injury risk and with Jaden Reed now back in the lineup kind of recently, you can probably do better than Watson. He does have upside, but he's always a risk to get re-injured. He's one of those players that genuinely is a little injury prone. Jaden Reed is a little bit safer this week since coming back 2 weeks ago. 47% of snaps according to Fantasy Pros, 4 targets, 4 for 31. And then last week, snap percentage went up to 65, targets went up to 6, and he had 5 for 55. So wouldn't shock me if he had a solid week. So he's like a wide receiver 3. And then, I'm not starting. I mean, Dobbs can always have a decent week, but he would be like my 3rd favorite option on the Packers. And then also, I'm not starting any tight ends for the Packers. For the Bears, Luther Burden and Rome Odunze are out. Cole Kmet, tight end, is questionable. DeAndre Swift, running back, is questionable. Looks like Tremaine Edmonds at linebacker is out. So they got a lot of injuries here. So I wouldn't be surprised if the Packers get this win. Amen. Why'd I even try to say this? Agbon Gemig. I don't know. He's out. It looks like I don't know what his role is, but another linebacker out. So a lot of injuries there. So with these injuries, we know Rome Odunze and Luther Burden are out at wide receiver. So that makes DJ Moore a little bit intriguing as a low wide receiver 2, high wide receiver 3. Been very inconsistent all year. but we know he's a good player, and he's had some spike weeks this year. I think two of them at least have been on my one or two of them have been on my bench. I got one good week from him. I drafted him in one league because he was going so late and I was going for upside, but he's been really bad most of the year other than 3 spike weeks. Last week was one of them. Only 5 targets, but turned into 4 for a nice 69 and 2 touchdowns. So with the injuries in this receiving room, he's an option. Colson Loveland, also with the wide receiver injuries, kind of gets a bit of a bump, kind of, secures his target volume a little bit. He's been solid at times this year. Last week, 5 targets, 4 for 63. The week before that, also 5 targets, 4 for 29 and a touchdown. So he's a solid low tight end 1. I'd probably play him over Tyler Warren with the Phillip Rivers resurrection happening. If you want to play him over Darren Waller with Tua getting benched, I understand that. So there are options here. The Packers are the second toughest matchup for tight ends over the last 8 weeks. But, is he a tight end or is he more of like a wide receiver? Packers are middle of the pack against wide receivers. Against running backs, they're the 12th toughest against running backs. So if DeAndre Swift is active, I still think he's a good play. Just given the landscape of the position, he's probably like a mid running back 2. If he's out, Monangai gets a big bump. So he's probably more of a standalone running back 3. But if Swift is out, Monangai is probably a must start, essentially. I mean, unless you have a stacked team. And I forgot to mention Zacchaeus at wide receiver is a little intriguing as like a deep league or DFS play. Just with the wide receiver injuries there, we've seen him have a role at times, but probably more of a wide receiver 4 or 5. And then Caleb Williams. I'm not a big Caleb Williams guy for fantasy. I know he has spike weeks sometimes. It's a tough matchup against the Packers, who are the 8th toughest matchup, and he's missing his receiver. So I would be looking elsewhere. At the quarterback position, if you're in a 2 quarterback league, he's probably like a low to mid, probably a low quarterback 2. So those are the Saturday games. Let's move on to Sunday. This game should be a lot of fun here. Also, don't forget to follow or subscribe if wherever you're enjoying the podcast. So, Chargers at 10-4, traveling to Dallas to take on the 6-7-1 Cowboys. This game could be a good time. Obviously, the Chargers O-line is in shambles and they've got some injuries going on, but the Cowboys defense is bad. Deron Bland at cornerback is out. Jenye Thomas, safety, is out. I don't even know if he's a starter, but Trayvon Diggs, cornerback, is still... Oh, he's listed as questionable. So he was on IR. He might get activated. He's questionable, according to ESPN. Kalen Carson, cornerback, questionable. So Quinnen Williams, defensive tackle, is also questionable for the Cowboys. And then their tackle, Tyler Guyton, on offense, is out. So both teams are a little banged up here. And Quinnen Williams has kind of made the Cowboys run defense a little bit, stingier lately. But if he's out, that is a huge blow to that defense. So I guess let's start with the Cowboys. They're a little easier. So Dak Prescott, the Chargers are a tough defense against quarterbacks. They're the 13th toughest over the last 8 weeks. But Dak is good enough where even in a tough matchup, with the Chargers probably putting up points, he'll have to throw the ball enough where, oh, sorry. I was looking at running backs there. My fault. Oh, sorry. I completely got that wrong. So the figure I just gave was against running backs for the Chargers defense. The Chargers are actually the overall toughest matchup for quarterbacks over the last 8 weeks. So upside is a little limited. They have a good defense. I thought that was weird. I thought they were tougher than what I said. But this game has a 50.5 point over-under. The Cowboys are also favored by 1.5 at home for what it's worth. So the Chargers are slight underdogs. But all in all, Dak Prescott is probably more of a low to mid quarterback 1 this week, whereas in the right matchup, he's more of a mid to high quarterback 1, but he's still playable. Like I'd play him over. I have him and Burrow in a league. I actually have 2 leagues where I have him and Burrow. I might split the decision, but if I had them both in one league and in my heart of hearts had to make a decision, I would start Dak. Just with Joe Burrow being kind of emo lately. Him versus like Brissett, my start of the week, I'd probably go I think Brissett's probably a little safer. Ooh, that's really tough. That's really tough. Oh, wow. This game just has such a good over-under. So does the Cardinals-Falcons game. That one's tough. That one's tough. Consensus on Fantasy Pros, Dak is slightly higher for what it's worth, but and anyways, that's enough time on Dak. Javonte Williams at running back. As I said earlier when I misquoted the ranking for quarterbacks, the Chargers are the 13th toughest matchup for running backs over the last 8 weeks. Still, Javonte is the clear workhorse there. It should be a high-scoring game. He gets goal line opportunities, so he's a low running back 1, probably. Low running back 1, high running back 2. And then at wide receiver, CeeDee Lamb, you're obviously starting him. And then George Pickens, I know it's been rough. If you have him, I'm probably still starting him. Like, if you look at the wide receiver landscape, once you get to the low wide receiver range, like wide receiver 1 range, you got like Jameson Williams, Chris Olave, Mike Evans, Michael Wilson, especially if Marv is out. You know, those are guys that you might consider over him. But still, Pickens could outperform those guys easily, especially in a game like this. So he's kind of in that tier. Once you get past him, you got like Jawan Jennings, my start of the week. DK Metcalf, whose target volume is incredibly frustrating, but he gets a good matchup against Detroit. Cortland Sutton, like, you know, I'd start Pickens over Zay Flowers, probably over Sutton. Even over Jawan Jennings, I'd probably still start Pickens. I'd start Pickens over Metcalf most likely. Like, Jennings and Metcalf are in good situations, but Pickens is just a tremendous player. He's had a rough couple of weeks, but, you know, last week he played the Vikings, who are the second toughest matchup for wide receivers, whereas, I guess the Chargers are probably tough too. Yeah, they're the 7th toughest matchup, so maybe I shouldn't say he's going to have a good week, but all in all, Pickens is a low wide receiver 1, high wide receiver 2. And then Jake Ferguson, he's definitely fallen off a little bit. He's still startable, but he's more of a tight end 2 at this point. The Chargers, on the why I said Falcons, are the 9th toughest matchup for tight ends over the last 8 weeks. So Javonte and CeeDee Lamb are in. Pickens is probably in. Ferguson, you could probably do better. You know, tight end 2 range, maybe a low tight end 1 if you really believe in him. And then Dak is probably in. For the Chargers, there are opportunities here. So at quarterback, you know, Justin Herbert's had a weird season, but the Cowboys are a great matchup. They're the 3rd easiest quarterback matchup over the last 8 weeks. So I thought about making him a start of the week. I didn't, just because he's been a little inconsistent, but he's a low quarterback 1, high quarterback 2. Omarion Hampton was almost my running back start of the week, just because if you look at the running back position, a lot of the best matchups, they're going against the best running backs, to the point where, like, once you get, you know, all the way down to like the 9th best running back, you got Bucky Irving against the Panthers. You know, ETN has been hot, but he's got a tough matchup against the Broncos. So that's why I had a hard time picking my start of the week. Hampton was almost my start of the week, but, you know, he is coming back from injury. The Cowboys' run defense has been better lately, more middle of the pack over the last 8 weeks. I wonder where they are over the last like 5 weeks. Also middle of the pack. What about the last 3 weeks? Also middle of the pack. So middle of the pack is pretty good for what the Cowboys were producing to start the year. So Hampton, since coming back from injury, week 14, he was 31% of the snaps. Week 15, he was 36% of the snaps, according to Fantasy Pros. He's still been like okay for fantasy. 2 tough matchups against the Eagles and Chiefs. This is definitely a tougher matchup. So I could see him having a better week in this game, especially if he gets more snaps, if he gets some goal line opportunities. He had 15 touches in week 14, and he had 16 touches in week 15. So the touches are still pretty solid. So he's a low to mid running back 2. At wide receiver, so the Cowboys, in terms of matchup, they're the 4th best matchup for wide receivers, schedule adjusted over the last 8 weeks. If I had to pick one, it would be Ladd McConkey. He's been a little disappointing lately, but with the matchup, he's a solid like low wide receiver 2. Quentin Johnston is questionable as of this recording. Been limited at practice. I probably am not playing him. He started the year so hot, but he's been abysmal lately, and he's injured. If he doesn't play, that probably helps the case for McConkey. Keenan Allen, probably more of a wide receiver 3, 4 at this point. He's been pretty bad, really bad lately as well. Wow. He hasn't had more than he had 53 yards against Jacksonville in week 11. Other than that, he's been in the 40s or lower every game since week 8. Yeah, he started the year super hot. 3 straight touchdowns, 6 in the 60s for yardage, and it's just been pretty bad lately. Had a spike week in week 7, 11 for 119 and a touchdown. But in this matchup, if Johnson is out, he could have an okay game, but we just haven't seen it lately. And then Gadsden at tight end. Again, if Johnston is out in this matchup, I would be fine playing him. The Cowboys are the 10th toughest matchup schedule adjusted for tight ends over the last 8 weeks. It's always kind of hard to judge tight end matchups unless it's really defined. We know the Bengals give up a ton of points against tight ends, but Gadsden, it's been really brutal for him lately. Since it looked like he was going to be a must start, it's been pretty slow for him. But last week, 5 targets, 4 for 61 against the Chiefs, so he's playable. Given the landscape, him versus Waller and Warren is tough, but depending on how you feel about those guys, he's either a low tight end 1 or a high tight end 2. I'd probably play him over Jake Ferguson, especially if Johnson is out. And yeah, Kamani Vidal at running back. I forgot to mention him, but he's been seeing snaps as well. Probably not someone I'm playing, but he could vulture a touchdown. He's been playing a higher percentage of the snaps than Hampton has. And the last 2 weeks with Hampton back, he saw 12 carries and 1 catch last week, and the week before that, 14 carries, 3 targets, 1 catch. Took it for 60 yards. So, probably not playing him, but he's the clear handcuff for Hampton managers. Let's move on to the 10-4 Bills taking on the 3-11 Cleveland Browns in Cleveland. So, I think this game might be pretty easy. David Njoku is out at tight end. So Harold Fannin for the Browns, he's intriguing. The Browns offense is obviously not great. The Bills are the 4th toughest matchup over the last 8 weeks for tight ends, but still Fannin is a mid tight end 1, just given that he's actually a very good start. So he was my start of the week last week. He was only 7 for 48, but he had 14 targets. The week before that, 11 targets, 8 for 114 and a touchdown. The week before that, only 5 targets, but 3 for 43 and a touchdown. So even in a tough matchup where they are, let's see, where is this matchup? They are 10.5 point home underdogs, and the over-under is only 41.5 points. It's a tough tight end matchup. Still, he's talented, and he is going to be probably the team's number 1 receiver with Njoku out, with no super talented receivers there. Judy is there, but that's about it. He's still a mid tight end 1. I'm not starting, Judy or Cedric Tillman or Isaiah Bond or, any options like that. The Bills are pretty tough against receivers. And then Quinshon Judkins at running back, I want to say he should be good, but I expect the Browns to be getting blown out here, and Judkins is just not used as a pass catcher. If you want to attack the Bills defense, you do it on the ground. So if he's able to get production early, he might be fine for fantasy. But last week, he's averaged 1.8, 1.9 yards an attempt over the last 2 weeks. Last week against the Bears, 12 for 21 on the ground, only 4 targets, caught 3 of them for -4 yards. The week before that, 14 for 26 on the ground, caught 1 of his 3 targets. Luckily, it was for 58 yards, but still, against the Titans, you would hope for more. So he's like a running back 2 at best, but I could definitely, there's a lot of downside here, low floor, especially if they're getting blown out. And then, Shedeur Sanders, I'm not starting him, obviously. If you're in a consolation bracket and you want to throw him in a 2 quarterback league or whatever, it's a quarterback 3, okay. But yeah, it's pretty much Fannin, maybe Judkins, that's it. And then for the Bills, Josh Allen, he's a must start. James Cook, a must start. The Browns' run defense has kind of fallen off lately. Over the last 3 weeks, the Browns are the 8th best matchup. Actually, over the last 5 weeks, the 5th best matchup. So depends how you look at it, but they started the year kind of tough against running backs, but that has changed. I'm not starting any of these receivers really, but if I had to start one, it would be Khalil Shakir, I guess. But I don't want to at all. He's probably like a wide receiver 4, maybe a wide receiver 3 at best. And then Dalton Kincaid. It's weird. I don't know how the Bills are. It's so weird because every week Josh Allen is pretty much great and they score points, but you don't want to start any of these receivers really. Kincaid has his weeks. He was on the injury report. He's good to go. So he's playable. I don't love the matchup, but you can start him as like a tight end too. Yeah. So that game's not super complicated. I don't even want to talk about this game, but I will for you guys. The Chiefs at 6-8, Kansas City Chiefs traveling to Tennessee to take on the 2-12 Titans. Cheapers. That's gross. So the Chiefs are 3-point road favorites. The over-under is a disgusting 37.5. Wow. Okay. The Chiefs, very injured. Patrick Mahomes tore his ACL, out for the year. Rashee Rice, stud receiver, out. So maybe that's lucky. Like you don't have to make that decision with Gardner Minshew starting at quarterback for the Chiefs. Jawan Taylor at tackle is out. Tyquan Thornton, wide receiver, out. They're missing like some defenders. Jalen Moore, tackle, out. So I mean, this game is probably going to be gross. So for Tennessee, I don't really want to start a single player. I dropped Tony Pollard literally instantly before he went on this 2-week stretch where he's been great. And I will say this game could be more competitive than you would think on the surface, just with the Titans playing okay lately, better than what they were at least. And with Mahomes out for the Chiefs, this game is going to be more competitive than it would have been otherwise. This game is also in Tennessee, so the Chiefs are the 7th toughest matchup for running backs over the last 8 weeks. But Pollard, he's been great, over 100 rushing yards each of the last 2 weeks, a touchdown last week, 2 before that. Not involved as a pass catcher really, only 1 catch for 8 yards over the last 2 weeks. Actually, 2 catches for 11 yards over the last 3 weeks. But I don't want to play him. He's a running back 3, but he's not like quite unplayable for me, but he's almost there. And then other than that, that's it. No receivers, IMN or DK, Gunnar Helm, Cam Ward at quarterback. Nope. And then for the Chiefs, I don't think I want to start anyone. Gardner Minshew starting at quarterback. You got Pacheco and Kareem Hunt there. I don't want to start any of them. If I had to start one, I'd hope Kareem Hunt falls in the end zone. Last week, Pacheco was 11 for 21. No targets over the last 2 weeks. 9 for 30 on the ground the week before that. So I guess you're kind of hoping like Kareem Hunt falls in the end zone as like a running back 3-4. He was only 6 for 12 last week. Got out carried by Pacheco. So I'm not touching any of those. With Mahomes, you have more red zone opportunities, but yeah. No Rashee Rice either. Their offense is probably going to stall a little bit. With no Mahomes, like Xavier Worthy doesn't really get a big bump. Like if you want to play him as a wide receiver 3-4, okay, but he hasn't had a good fantasy game since week 4. You can probably do better. Especially like if you're in the playoffs right now, your team is probably not relying on Xavier Worthy. And then Kelsey is going to play, even though they're out of the playoffs. No Mahomes. With Gardner Minshew, he obviously gets a hit, but the tight end position is gross, so he's still playable. He's got a lot of downside. low floor. The Titans are the 5th best tight end matchup over the last 8 weeks when you adjust for schedule. So he's like a low to mid tight end 1 still, depending on how you perceive other players. Like Goddard, I'd probably play Goddard over Kelsey. Fannin, I'd play over Kelsey. You know, Pitts, even with Drake London back, you're probably playing him. McBride, Kittle, even Bowers against Houston over Kelsey. Colby Parkinson already played. He did bad. So if you have him and Kelsey, hopefully he didn't play Parkinson. Dalton Schultz, like I don't blame you if you want to play Schultz or Loveland over Kelsey. Once you get to like Tyler Warren, that's where it's like, okay, both have like bad quarterback situations. Darren Waller, great matchup, bad quarterback situation. So it really is up to like, you know, kind of what you think about the situations. Like I'm not a mind reader, but I'm hesitant to say he's going to be good. Speaking of the Bengals, let's get to their game. So my computer is so slow. Wow. The 4-10 Cincinnati Bengals traveling to Miami to take on the 6-8 Dolphins. This game, 47.5 point over under. Bengals are favored by 4.5. Noah Fant out at tight end for the Bengals. T. Higgins is questionable with a concussion. So, you know, I could see this game hitting the under for sure. 47.5 is pretty intense for a game where, you know, the Dolphins are starting Quinn Ewers. They benched Tua. Rookie quarterback drafted in the 7th round. So who knows, you know, maybe he's great, but it's a negative hit to the Dolphins. I know Tua isn't everyone's favorite quarterback, but he was good enough to get the ball to his players. So Achane is still a really good play. I'm still probably playing him in my guillotine league, but you know, without Tua, we've seen Achane struggle in the past. Luckily, they're playing the Bengals. They're the 3rd best matchup for running backs over the last 8 weeks. Jalen Waddle, however, so Achane is still probably a must start, like high running back 1. Jalen Waddle had been kind of disappointing lately for what kind of we thought he might do with Tyreek Hill out. Like he had a stretch where he was great, but like he hasn't had more than 50 yards since their week 12 bye week. He had a touchdown a couple weeks ago, but last week only 2 for 26. So he's a talented player, and if Ewers is competent, like he might be able to feed him. The Bengals are surprisingly tough against wide receivers. They're the 8th toughest matchup over the last 8 weeks, probably because people just throw to the tight ends. But Waddle is more of a wide receiver 2, whereas with Tua, he'd probably be a little higher, like more of a higher wide receiver 2 probably. And then Darren Waller, he was going to be my start of the week, but with Tua being benched, he gets a bit of a hit, obviously. He'd probably be like a must-start tight end if Tua were playing, because the Bengals are like historically bad against the position. And Waller has been, you know, really good at times this year. He was injured, came back, went on a tear, got injured again, came back. It was a little bit slow, but last week, 8 targets, 7 for 66 and 2 touchdowns. Like he was primed for this matchup. So it all comes down to Quinn Ewers. Like I do not know if Quinn Ewers is going to be good. So, it's the best possible matchup. So he's still in play, but it's more of like a low tight end 1, maybe a mid tight end 1, depending on how you view him with like Tyler Warren or Kelsey with their quarterback situations. Like they also have bad things going on. Colson Loveland, Dalton Schultz, like those type of, like Dallas Goedert, those type of situations. And yeah, that's it. Like I'm not starting Quinn Ewers in his first game. But, you know, DFS, if you want to take a shot on him, like, you know, he is playing the Bengals for what it's worth. Like, that's a pretty good matchup. For what it's worth, the Bengals are the 7th best matchup for quarterbacks lately over the last 8 weeks. And then on the Bengals side of the ball, Burrow is I'm a little worried about him. The Dolphins are actually a pretty tough defense. They're middle of the pack against quarterbacks over the last 8 weeks here. He was terrible last week against the Ravens. So he's played 3 games since coming back from injury. 261-2 in week 13. 284-4 with 2 picks in week 14 against Buffalo. And then week 15, he played Baltimore again. So we played them in week 13 and 15. And yeah, last week he was only 225, no touchdowns, 2 picks. So, I mean, he's a mid to low quarterback one. Like, if you want to play Dak over him, I get it. Lamar, even Brock Purdy against the Colts, I get it. Drake May, Hurts, Allen are in over him. Jared Goff, that's a toss-up. Goff probably, I don't know. He's prone to having bad games as well. I'd probably play Jacoby Brissett over Joe Burrow. That's crazy. He's safer for sure. Watching them pre Brissett having his worst game of the year. Chase Brown, you're probably starting him. He's a low running back 1, high running back 2. I will say over the last 8 weeks, the Bengals are the toughest matchup in fantasy for running backs. So you're still probably playing him, but just be aware of that. If T. Higgins is active, I think that helps the offense. Like, you're obviously starting Jamar Chase no matter what. The Bengals are middle of the pack against receivers. It doesn't matter the matchup. You start him every week. But I think T. Higgins, if he's active, it just helps the offense in general, move the ball, get in scoring position. But, he's questionable. Yeah, it's just, if Higgins is active, it's a concussion, so he should be fine, like, health-wise. Obviously, if he gets hit again and gets concussed again, and he'll leave the game. But, well, if they actually take him out, with the whole controversy with him not being taken out, last time he had this concussion issue, but he'd be very playable, probably like a wide receiver 2, I would say. And then Mike Gesicki, if Higgins is out, he's like a deep league guy. The Dolphins are the 3rd best matchup for tight ends over the last 8 weeks. But if Higgins is in, I'm not playing him. And if Higgins is out, I'm also probably not playing him. Last week with Higgins out, he's only 1 for 11 on 2 targets. So, I mean, now the Ravens are the toughest matchup against tight ends apparently over the last 8 weeks, but still, you can probably do better outside of DFS. Next up, the Bucks and the Panthers in Carolina. Both teams 7-7. Both teams lost last week in games they could have won. The Panthers needed to beat the Saints to get a stranglehold on this division, and they lost. So, it's they're having a true mid-off. The Bucks are 3-point road favorites. The over-under is 45.5. For the Panthers, you're probably starting. I mean, Rico and Chuba have been splitting more lately. Rico is still the one I would want. He's more of a low running back 2 at this point. Last week, he had 16 for 49 and a touchdown on the ground. So the touchdown kind of saved him. Caught his 1 target for 5 yards. And then Chuba Hubbard, he was only 8 for 29, 1 for 9 through the air on 1 target. So they're kind of going hot hand approach. The Buccaneers are not the super stingy run defense they once were. They're kind of middle of the pack. So Rico's in play, but not a must start. But, if he gets the hot hand and I'd probably rank him as more of a mid running back 2, I would say. And then, Bryce Young, outside of a 2 quarterback league, even then I wouldn't want to play him, but, he's in play in a super flex league. The Bucks are the 2nd best quarterback matchup for what it's worth. So, and then at wide receiver, the only guy you would maybe start is Tedero McMillan, just because, he's the talented rookie. He's had a good year. Bucks are middle of the pack against receivers over the last 8 weeks, but it's been pretty bad for McMillan over the last 3 games. He hasn't had more than 2 catches. Now in week 12 and 13, he had a touchdown in each week. Week 12, he was 2 for 35 and a touchdown on 7 targets. Week 13, he was 1 for 43 and a touchdown on 2 targets. Then a bye week, then last week, 2 for 25 on 4 targets. So no touchdown, no big play. Disappointing. So in week 11, he had 12 targets, caught 8 of them for 130 yards and 2 touchdowns. So we like that. But he hasn't played Tampa Bay yet this year. They're playing them this week and then week 18. So those are going to be big games to decide the division. But McMillan is probably a low wide receiver 2. Like, I'd probably play Justin Jefferson over him. Zay Flowers is safer. McMillan probably has more upside. I'd play Sutton and Jennings and probably Metcalf over McMillan. Pickens for sure. I'd probably play McMillan over like Waddle. Probably over Devontae Smith. And that's it for the Bucks. Or sorry, for the Panthers. On the Bucks side of things, Baker Mayfield started the season, super hot. It's cooled off lately, but he's got his players back. Like, his receivers are getting healthier. Panthers are actually the 9th toughest matchup for quarterbacks over the last 8 weeks. But Baker's playable, more of like a high quarterback 2. Last week was okay against the Falcons, 19 of 34, 277 and 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. Not super exciting, but he could be all right. His wide receivers are all healthy with Mike Evans, Egbuka, I should say, and Chris Godwin. I think Mike Evans is probably the one I'd want to play the most. In his first game back last week against the Falcons, he looked awesome. 6 for 132 on 12 targets, only played 55% of the snaps. That should go up. He's a week removed from the injury. He's off the injury report. He's good to go. I would probably be playing him if you have him as like a low wide receiver 1. Emeka Egbuka. It's been pretty rough. He's still in play as a wide receiver 2-3, but he hasn't had a good fantasy game since week 10. Last week, 4 for 64 on 7 targets. So, I mean, you can play him. He's talented, but if you've been saying that every week, you've been hurting your lineup. Panthers are middling against receivers. And then Godwin, wide receiver 3, I would say. Last week, he was 4 for 20, got in the end zone. So, Mike Evans, in my opinion, is the one you want. I don't really want to play Kate Otten in this matchup. Like, he's just there. He's just doing his thing. And the Panthers are actually the 5th toughest matchup over the last 8 weeks when you adjust for schedule. So it's not even a good matchup. Like, if they're playing the Bengals, maybe it's like, okay, maybe I could see him making a play. Bucky Irving, almost my start of the week, just given how he's still probably like an auto start in most people's minds. But he had a kind of down week last week. It's a good matchup. The Buccaneers are the 5th best matchup for running backs over the last 8 weeks. And he had a down week, so I thought maybe I'd make him a start of the week. But I am concerned about his upside because he is not being used as their goal line back. I played him in my guillotine league last week, and it almost cost me. Like, they were on the goal line a couple times, and they just kept giving the carries to Sean Tucker. So unless that changes, his upside is capped. He was 16 for 60 on the ground, 1 for 11 on 3 targets through the air, but those touchdowns are very important. Yeah, so he's still a low running back 1, but I worry about the touchdown upside. I mean, he could score from further out. Sean Tucker, maybe he doesn't get every single goal line carry. Maybe Irving gets one here. You just don't know, but I'm a little bit concerned about that. Sort of noise. That was weird. And yeah, I think that's it for the Buccaneers. So, like, in my guillotine league, I'm probably not playing him, so he'll probably pop off. Just because my team is so stacked in that league. Obviously, there's 3 teams left. And I think in the past, they made it so you couldn't pick people up after a certain point, but this year, like, you can just pick people up willy-nilly. So, moving on to my Minnesota Vikings at 6-8, traveling to take on the New York Giants at 2-12. So, for the Vikings, Christian Darrisaw out for the season at tackle. Brian O'Neill, questionable at tackle. Great. Jonathan Grenard, linebacker, out. Josh Metellus, safety, out. So we're a little banged up right now. We're a little bit banged up. We're playing the Giants, though, who they have some exciting young players, but, I believe they have the number 1 pick right now if the season ended today. Is that true? JJ McCarthy has looked pretty darn good the last couple weeks. Granted, that was against the Commanders and the Cowboys. So I'm not saying, he's anything special yet, but it's good to see him show something, right? The Vikings are favored by 2.5 on the road. The over-under is 43.5, so it's not great. McCarthy's in play in a super flex as a low to mid quarterback too, but Aaron Jones just. Oh, by the way, the Giants they're an okay matchup for quarterbacks. Nothing crazy, but the Giants are a great matchup for running backs. So they're the second best matchup for the position over the last 8 weeks. I almost made Aaron Jones a start of the week just because, like, I didn't, I was going down the list to kind of see, like, who has a good matchup and who do I actually want to play. Aaron Jones, I almost made him a start of the week. I am a little worried that Jordan Mason might vulture some, like, goal line opportunities. But Aaron Jones has been solid at times, disappointing at others. He hasn't really had a good week for fantasy for a while. A couple weeks ago, he was 14 for 76 on the ground, but didn't catch any passes, only one target. But in this matchup, he's a low running back too. I'd probably play like Rico Dowdle over him, Swift if he's healthy, Breece Hall, Judkins, Harvey Henderson. But he's in play. Jordan Mason is touchdown dependent. Like, if you want to take a shot in like DFS or whatever, go for it. The matchup is there, so thought I'd just talk about them. But at receiver, I am okay starting Jefferson. I know it's been brutal. It's been terrible, but McCarthy has looked good. Better. He looked really good last week against the Cowboys. Like, it's the best matchup, but he looked like great. Jefferson still had a bad game, but he had 2 touchdowns. He had one called back to like a formation penalty. Like, it didn't affect the play. And then he dropped a touchdown. So he had 8 targets. It only turned into 2 for 22, but he could have had even like a 2 touchdown performance. So the whole narrative would have been different. So he's in play. It's been really bad lately, but he hasn't had a good fantasy week since week 9. And even then he was 6 for 47 and a touchdown. It wasn't like he lit the world on fire, but the team said they want to get him to 1,000 yards. He's at 832. So they're probably going to try to feed him here. He's a wide receiver too. I wouldn't play Addison. If you want to take a shot on him in a deep league or DFS, like, he's a wide receiver 3. He's always got touchdown upside, but he's only got 3 touchdowns on the year. The offense hasn't been scoring as much as it has in the past. And really, Jalen Naylor is kind of the guy that he's got a thing with McCarthy. I mean, he's had 2. I don't actually play him, but he's had 2 big weeks, week 10 and week 15. Last week, 3 for 47 and 2 touchdowns. Week 10, 5 for 124 and a touchdown on 6 targets. But most weeks he's got a lot of 0 yardage games, very low yardage games. So don't actually play him, but I played him in like a DFS showdown thing, and he was good. He put me in a good position. For the Giants, Jackson Dart is playable. He runs the ball, so he's always got potential to be good for fantasy. The Vikings are the second toughest matchup over the last 8 weeks for quarterbacks. So he's more of a high quarterback 2 than like if he was playing a really good if he was in a really good matchup. Dart is the kind of guy that I would love to play as like a streamer, but like against Washington last week, he was 246 and 1 pick, but he had a 9 for 63 on the ground. So it's a tough matchup, but with the way he uses his legs, he could be fine, but I'm not forcing it. Vikings are middle of the pack against running backs over the last 8 weeks. Tyrone Tracy's in play as a running back 2. Against Washington last week, he was great. 15 for 70 and a touchdown on the ground. 3 for 27 and a touchdown through the air. But I was playing against him in a league where I had a lead in a 2-week playoff, and then the guy started Kyle Pitts against me on Thursday, and then everyone in his lineup went off, and I lost, including Tyrone Tracy. So could regress, but he was great. He played 76% of the snaps according to Fantasy Pros. So he is the one to play over Devin Singletary, it looks like, who was 5 for 13 and then 1 for 1 through the air on a 1 target, 24% of snaps. But, they had their bye week the week before, and then the week before that, Singletary was 51% of snaps, 12 for 68 and a touchdown, 3 for 34 through the air. So you never know. It could go back to that, but I think Tracy is the one you want there. And then the Vikings are the second toughest matchup for receivers over the last 8 weeks. Wandale is still in play as a low wide receiver 2, high wide receiver 3. Just because he gets peppered with targets. He's had 8+ targets every week since week 9. Last week, 10 targets, turned into 5 for 54 and a touchdown. Might be a little limited in the upside department, just in general he is, and in this matchup, it's tougher. Like, I liked him last week against the Commanders, but this week it's a little more bleak, but the targets are there. And Darius Slayton is just like a deep shot type of guy. You know, we got some injuries on defense, so maybe we're a little more leaky. Last week he saw 10 targets, only turned into 4 for 53. And then their bye week, 2 weeks before that, he was 2 for 41 and a touchdown on 3 targets. So probably more of a deep league DFS play. But and then Theo Johnson, tight end, he seems to be like a solid streamer most weeks. This probably isn't. It's a middle of the pack matchup, but this isn't like a spot that screams like he's going to be great for fantasy. Last week he was 3 for 72 on 4 targets in a much better matchup against the Commanders. So, you know, if he happens to catch a touchdown or rip off a big play, he might be all right, but more of a mid tight end 2 for me. We got another New York team, the New York Jets at 3-11, traveling to New Orleans to take on the 4-10 Saints. So, for the Jets, Garrett Wilson out for the year. Mason Taylor at tight end is out. I'm seeing that Fields and Tyrod Taylor are questionable. So if they're out, Brady Cook is going to get the start again. I don't know if that decision has been made yet, for sure. I don't know. I don't know who's going to start. I would think if one of those other guys was active, he would start. But I see an article here, Jets Cook stays quarterback 1, even with vets on the way back. So maybe they're just going to keep starting him. Yeah, they're Jets in evaluation mode will start rookie quarterback Brady Cook again. So sorry, I don't keep up with the Jets as much as I probably should. So yeah, that hurts. Obviously, no matter who they start, like, it's not going to be great. He was 22 of 33, 176 yards and a touchdown, 3 picks last week against Jacksonville, 6 for 39 on the ground. So, you know, no Mason Taylor. So Jeremy Ruckert, Jelani Woods, Stone Smart, anyone? No, don't play them. The Saints also have a pretty solid defense, like better than you would think. So, I mean, Adonai Mitchell is maybe like a deep shot, like wide receiver 3. He's been good 2 of the last 3 weeks. Last week he was 6 for 58 and a touchdown on 9 targets. But other than that, like, Breece Hall is in play as, I mean, what's the over-under on this game? 40.5. Yuck. The Saints are favored by 6.5 at home. So, you know, Breece Hall, it's just, I wish he was in a better situation. Last week he was 12 for 23 and 2 for 14 through the air. He's, you know, he could score a touchdown or whatever. He's still like a low running back 2, but if you're a playoff team, you might have better options. And then for the Saints, Alvin Kamara is out. Devin Neal is out at running back. Devon Vele, questionable. Tipton, questionable at receiver. Kendry Miller is still out. So, Evan Hull and Audric Estime are going to get some run at running back. The Jets are, you know, if they're winning, it might be a game script where the Saints can run, and the Jets are the best matchup for running backs over the last 8 weeks. If I had to play one, it would be Estime as a wide receiver, running back 3. Evan Hull, I wouldn't start him, but, you know, Estime once upon a time was a guy that people had, you know, some intrigue with. So if he's going to start and it's a good matchup and they're leading, like, he might be okay. Like, if you have like actual good running backs, like, I wouldn't pick him up and start him over actually good players, but no, he's a deep shot, probably a cheap DFS play if you do that. Tyler Shuck has been actually okay. I don't know why they didn't, you know, start him to begin the season, but last 3 weeks he's been really serviceable. I don't know if they're going to need to throw the ball a lot, but they don't have any running backs, so maybe they'll just pepper Olave with targets. Jets are a above average matchup. He's a solid quarterback 2 in like a super flex league. And then Chris Olave, you're starting him. You know, the Saints they're not good enough. They're just bad enough where like this game could be more competitive than you would think. So, and if they are winning by a lot, they're probably going to need Olave to have done a lot of that production. He's been really solid all season long. Might not have as much upside as other players, but last week he was 6 for 85 and a touchdown. Like, he's honestly like a low wide receiver 1 for me. So, and then Jawan Johnson, he's interesting. He's had his moments this year where he's been okay. 4, 4, 9, and 7 targets the last 4 weeks. Caught all 4 of his targets last week, only 30 yards. But, you know, high tight end 2. Hope he gets a touchdown. And let's get out of that game. Let's move on to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Traveling to Denver to take on the 12-2 Denver Broncos. The Jags are 10-4. This game has a 47.5 point over-under. The Broncos are 3.5 point home favorites. Bashaw Tutin is out at running back for this game, so that's big for the Jacksonville running back room. Travis Etienne has been on fire lately. The Broncos are they're a really good defense. They're the 10th toughest running back matchup over the last 8 weeks when you adjust for schedule, but Etienne has been too good to sit down. You know, he's a low to mid running back 1. Like, if for whatever reason you went super running back heavy and like maybe you picked up Michael Wilson to flex or whatever, like maybe you would bench him in this matchup, but like he's been so good lately. I mean, last week he did have 3 receiving touchdowns to kind of, you know, on only 3 receptions to kind of make up for not having a great rushing game. Only 12 for 32 on the ground, 3 for 73 through the air on 4 targets. But the week before that, 20 for 74, 2 touchdowns, only 1 for 8 through the air. But like with Tutin out, especially, that just secures his volume. So I think he's still a good play. I almost made him a start of the week just because I was going to be like, yo, it's a tough matchup, but he's been great. So don't like overthink it. So I don't want to say he's a must start just because I hate when people do that unless it's truly like Christian McCaffrey, Bijan Robinson type of guy. But he's probably someone you're starting, most likely. The Broncos are a tough matchup for quarterbacks too. Trevor Lawrence has been really awesome. The over-under here is 47.5, so there could be points scored, especially if, you know, if both offenses do their part and it becomes a back and forth. But these are also 2 really solid defenses. So Lawrence is, even though he's been hot, coming off of a 6 touchdown game, 5 passing, 1 rushing. He's more of a quarterback 2. And you have to remember, I missed the playoffs because I drafted Brian Thomas Jr. in the 2nd round of my main league over Jonathan Taylor. So I know it's a tough matchup against the Broncos. Patrick Surtain, you know, might cover him, or he might cover Jacoby Myers. We'll see primarily who he's going to cover. But given what he made me miss the playoffs. He had a good week last week, you know, in my consolation bracket. So there's a good chance that he'll do well just based on that. So in all seriousness, he's more of like a low wide receiver 2, high wide receiver 3. But if he like scores or rips off a big play, you know why. I'd rather play Jacoby Myers. He's been really good. They just signed him to a contract extension, 3-year, $60 million deal, according to Fantasy Pros. And he's been really solid. So, you know, it's a tough matchup. He's more of a wide receiver 2. I'd play like McMillan, Flowers, Jefferson, Sutton, Jennings over him. Him versus like Devontae Smith. Maybe you lean Smith because of the matchup, but Myers has been just solid. You know, McLaurin, Waddle, like he's kind of in that tier. And then tight end, Brenton Strange. He kind of screwed me over last week, even though Trevor Lawrence went off. Didn't really mean anything for fantasy. He was 1 for 26 on 3 targets, so I'm probably not playing him. For the Broncos, this is the exact type of spot where coming off a good week, you would start Bo Nix and he'll just completely disappoint. So Bo Nix is in play as a low quarterback 1, high quarterback 2. Jags are middle of the pack against quarterbacks lately, but he's very inconsistent. So not a must start, but intriguing streamer, low quarter, or you have him, you might play him. And then it's tough to run on Jacksonville. I would still be fine starting RJ Harvey just because he's seeing a lot of volume. But with the matchup, he's more of like a mid to high running back 2. But he's been good lately. Last week in a tough matchup with the Packers, 19 for 65 and a touchdown. Only 1 target. Didn't catch it, but he's been involved in the passing game a lot of weeks. So he's an okay play. And then at receiver, if I have to play one against the kind of middling receiver defense of the Jags, it would be Cortland Sutton as a kind of mid to high wide receiver 2. Last week he's seen 10 targets 2 weeks in a row. Last week 7 for 113 and a touchdown. The week before that 6 for 62, and then the week before that even he had 6 targets. He got 5 of them for 62 and a touchdown. So he's had 3 solid weeks in a row. So he's definitely playable, and I think that's about it. Troy Franklin, I know he's kind of like a fun dart throw at times. That's kind of all I would consider him. Last week, he was 6 for 85 and a touchdown on 6 targets, but I believe Marvin Mims was out for that game, if I'm not mistaken. No, he played. Wasn't someone out? Oh, Pat Bryant was out. So Mims, 4 for 29 on 6 targets, 31% of snaps. If you care to know, Troy Franklin he's probably more of a wide receiver 4 this week, but he was 50% of the snaps, and that was with Pat Bryant out. I'm just verifying that that's true. Yes, he did not play last week. So now that Bryant is back, that might make it a little muckier. But Sutton is probably like the one you want. He played 88% of snaps last week. Percent of snaps. Did I say that right the first time? I don't know. Moving on, 5-9 Atlanta Falcons traveling to take on the 3-11 Arizona Cardinals. This game actually could be exciting. The Falcons are 3-point road favorites, 48.5 point over under. Drake London is questionable. If he plays, monitor the news to kind of see like if he's on a snap count or anything. It's the playoffs, so like it's kind of annoying to have to deal with this, but Kirk Cousins is obviously starting for the Falcons still. So if Drake London is back, I think Kyle Pitts takes a little bit of a hit. I know he was like a league winner last week. You're still probably starting him unless you have like McBride or Kittle. If you want to play him over Bowers, who's playing the Houston Texans, I get that. Pitts, Bowers, Fannin are kind of in a tier. Kittle and McBride are like auto starts. And then after that, you got like the Kelsey, Goddard, Parkinson type of guys. You could make a case that Goddard is in the same tier as Pitts, Bowers, and Fannin, but I'd probably put him just below just because he's a little bit like touchdown dependent. But if Drake London is back, it's a good matchup against the Cardinals. Their whole defense is pretty bad, and they score. So the Cardinals are actually somehow the 6th toughest matchup for receivers lately. Maybe it's because they're the 4th easiest matchup for running backs. So Bijan is obviously in as like a must-start running back. He's a must-start every week, but in this spot, you could definitely see him, be like the running back 1 overall on the week. If London is back, Mooney and Sills become not playable. Sills, if London is out, I'd probably rather play over Mooney, which is insane to say, but he's been like somewhat involved in those situations. But yeah, let's not get crazy here. And then Tyler Algier at running back you're probably not playing him, but again, deep leagues, DFS in this matchup, you just never know. He'll randomly score a touchdown sometimes, so just probably not playing him. And then Kirk Cousins, you're probably not playing him. Like maybe in the two quarterback league, you could play him as a quarterback 2. But last week he had a really good fantasy game against Tampa Bay, 373 and 3. Obviously, he's not the same player he once was, but you know. And then for the Cardinals, Jacoby Brissett was my start of the week, so I like him as a low to mid quarterback 1. It's the 4th best matchup over the last 8 weeks for quarterbacks. Michael Carter is going to be the starting running back, it looks like, with all the injuries to that running back room, with Bam, Zonovan Knight out, Trey Benson not coming back for the season, and then James Conner obviously still out from early in the year. So it's Michael Carter and DeMarcado. Falcons are an above average matchup for running backs. Michael Carter would be the one I would want. He's a low running back 2, high running back 3. And he had a good week in week 5 when he was a starter, and then they kind of shifted to more Bam Knight. But if he's the true starter, he could be solid. He's a good pass catcher. Even with Bam Knight, he's from week 15 and previous, he was 4, 4, 6, 3, and 7 targets. So especially, like, I don't know his price on like DraftKings and stuff, but if he's cheap, he might be like a nice little free space. And then a receiver, Michael Wilson, he's basically a must start at this point with how well he's been playing. The Falcons are the best matchup for receivers over the last 8 weeks. And he's been like arguably the best receiver you could have lately. Over the last 5 weeks, he's been great in 4 of them. Week 13 was rough. And was that the week that Marv was back? Let me check. I think it was. Yeah, so Marvin Harrison played in week 13 against Tampa Bay. So not a bad matchup. And Michael Wilson was very disappointing. So if Marv is back, I almost made Michael Wilson my start of the week, but I didn't, because if Marv is back, I'm just a little worried. I would still be playing Wilson, but I didn't want to go on record and publicly proclaim to start Michael Wilson and then have Marvin Harrison come back and kind of wreck it. Now, I think Wilson has established himself enough where it's like, even if Marv is back, he's going to get targets, but I'm just a little worried. I would just be a little worried. There's just a little more downside that exists, but still, I would be starting Michael Wilson as like a low wide receiver 1. And if Marv is out, I mean, he's a must start. Like Jamar Chase, Amon-Ra, Puka, JSN, they already played, but CeeDee Lamb, I would start over Wilson. Nico Collins, probably over Wilson. And once you get to like AJ Brown, Jameson Williams, Chris Olave, Mike Evans, like I would maybe start Michael Wilson over those guys if he's alone in this matchup. Even last week against Houston, like brutal matchup. He saw 11 targets, 5 for 54 and a touchdown, like against the like one of the worst matchups for receivers. Like that's crazy. And then Trey McBride, probably the best start at the position this week. If not him, it would be Kittle, who I also added in my Guillotine League. Falcons are middle of the pack against tight ends, schedule adjusted over the last 8 weeks. Let's move on here. We got the 8-6 Pittsburgh Steelers going to Detroit to take on the 8-6 Detroit Lions. TJ Watt for the Steelers is out. Stud pass rusher. So that's big. So for the Steelers, if you're going to attack the Lions defense, you want to do it through the air. They're tough to run on. Jaylen Warren has kind of been falling off a little bit. He's more of like a running back, honestly, running back 3 at this point. I was hesitant to start him last week. I had him on my bench last week, and I'm glad I did because he was 12 for 33 on the ground, 3 for 15 through the air on 3 targets. He's been very touchdown dependent each of the previous 3 weeks. Like he was barely in double digits with a touchdown each of the last 3 weeks. So I probably would be looking to not play Jaylen Warren. And then for kind of the passing game, if you're going to attack Detroit, you pretty much do it through the air. This game is a 52.5 point over under, and the Lions are favored by 7 at home. So Uh, the Lions are like the, let's see, 6th best matchup for quarterbacks over the last 8 weeks. So Rodgers still more of a super flex quarterback too, but he could have a good game. Metcalf is intriguing because he's DK Metcalf. He was given all this money. He's a talented player. The Lions are the 3rd best matchup for receivers over the last 8 weeks. And, 2 weeks ago, we saw Metcalf get 12 targets, turned into 7 for 148. And then last week, oh boy, how do we follow that up? Only 3 targets, but he turned it into 3 for 55 and a touchdown. So he was almost, again, I've been saying this a few times, but he was almost my start of the week. But the target volume is just so inconsistent. I do think this is a good spot for him with a high over-under, good matchup. He should be a high wide receiver 2 with upside if he actually gets targets and gets in the end zone. But again, it's just, you never know. They utilize him in a weird way. And then that's the only receiver I would touch, like Calvin Austin, Adam Thielen, no thank you. MVS, even though he got in the end zone, no thanks. He did catch a touchdown, right? Marquez. I just have to verify. Yep, 1 for 19 and a touchdown. That's funny. Not touching that though. And then, Lions are middling against tight ends. I don't think you're gonna really start Darnell Washington, Pat Freiermuth. They all just kind of cannibalize each other a little bit to the point where none of them are really startable. But one of them could always catch a random touchdown. And then for the Lions, I think in this game environment at home, it's a spot where we could see some fantasy goodness here. So we'll start with Jared Goff at the quarterback position. He's a low to mid quarterback 1. Steelers defense isn't as great as you would, think based on their steel curtain history. And no TJ Watt hurts. So Goff is in play. And then Gibbs, you're obviously starting him. Montgomery, it's kind of getting hard to really trust him. He could fall in the end zone, but the Steelers are actually the 5th toughest matchup for running backs over the last 5 weeks. I still think they're going to score. And Montgomery has scored 3 straight weeks. Even with that being said, he hasn't been great. Against Dallas, he was 6 for 60 and a touchdown, 1 for 13 through the air. Last week, against the Rams, 7 for 32, but got in the end zone, 1 target, no catches. So even if he gets in the end zone, he's still probably going to be just okay. So more of a running back 3. But I'm very interested in the receivers here in this matchup. Still with no Laporta, obviously, at tight end. Amon-Ra and Jamison Williams are both great plays here. Steelers middle of the pack over the last 8 weeks against receivers, but Amon-Ra is an every week start. And Jamison Williams is a low to mid wide receiver 1, and he's been consistent. He's shown upside and been consistent. He said 9+ targets, 3 straight weeks, 9 or 10 each week. Week 12, he had that random goose, but since their bye week, he's been great. In week 8, he's been great every single week except for that one random goose in week 12. So it's pretty easy, pretty simple. Start your Lions stars. And then we got the 2-12 Las Vegas Raiders traveling to take on the 9-5 Houston Texans. This is disgusting, but it looks like Geno Smith is going to be back at quarterback. He's not good, but he's probably better than Kenny Pickett. So it gives you a little more hope for Brock Bowers and Ashton Genty. But if you look at the Raiders across the board, the Texans, they just shut down pretty much every position unless your name is Jacoby Brissett. So Genty is in consideration at running back, but he's really more of a low running back 2, high running back 3 even, just with the struggles that this offense has in this brutal matchup. And actually, if you want to know specifically, over the last 8 weeks, the Texans are the 4th toughest matchup. Also, the Texans are favored by 14.5. And the over-under is only 37.5. So this game could get ugly. I think the Texans are just going to win this game super easily. The Raiders are going to really struggle to score. So it's not a good spot for the Raiders. The only other guy you would maybe consider is Brock Bowers at tight end. And when I say maybe consider, I shouldn't have said that. You're probably starting him unless you have McBride or Kittle. If If you want to play Pitts, if you want to play Fannin over him, I get it. But Bowers is still like a top 5 option. But be prepared for disappointment, but he's too talented to really bench unless you have like a stud, another stud. And then for the Texans, there are opportunities here. Just, especially for the running game. So, Stroud is in play. I don't know how much they're going to need him. Raiders are middle of the pack against quarterbacks over the last 8 weeks. So Stroud's a low quarterback 1, high quarterback 2. Probably more of a high quarterback 2, honestly. Nico Collins is in play as a receiver. That's probably the only one I want to play at this point. If you're like in the playoffs, like Jaden Higgins, he's had his moments, but I think it's Nico. That's pretty much it. Raiders are the 12th toughest matchup over the last 8 weeks for receivers. At tight end, Dalton Schultz is interesting. The Raiders are a little stingier than you might think at in terms of pass defense, but still Dalton Schultz is involved. Been sneaky good this year. Last week, 8 for 76 and a touchdown on 9 targets against the Cardinals. He can bust just like any tight end can, but he's actually been pretty consistent relative to the position. So he's actually like a low tight end 1 for me. And then my running back start of the week was, the Texans starter. So Raiders are okay matchup. If Woody Marks starts and is good to go, you start him. If not, you go to Nick Chubb. If he's not in, then it's Jawar Jordan. So moving on to the Sunday night game. This game should be fun. 11-3 New England Patriots traveling to take on the 7-7 Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens really, really need this win and are favored by 3 at home. The over-under is 49.5, which is fun. So hopefully the Ravens show up and we get a nice little back and forth. On the Patriots side, Drake May is in play. That's what I say. Okay. He's probably the top 3 to 5 option. Ravens' defense has been, better lately than it was to start the year. But with a guy like Drake May, I'm not super scared. But Ravens have an above average defense, I would say. Travion Henderson, running back 2. Obviously, I played against him in the playoffs last week. He was 14 for 148 and 2 touchdowns, 2 for 13 through the air on 3 targets. So he's always a big play guy. Ramondre is still going to be involved, but I don't really want to play Ramondre outside of just being like a running back 3. That is probably going to be disappointing. And then at wide receiver for the Patriots, the Ravens give up some points to receivers, and you expect points to be scored and Drake May to put up production. So I just don't know who. I mean, Diggs is probably the one you would obviously prefer over anyone else, but he's still more of a wide receiver 3. It's been really bad the last 3 weeks. He's had 20. So last week, going from week 15 to earlier, 26 yards, by week 26 yards, 20 yards, 105 yards. So he's played 50% of snaps or less over the last 3 games. So I don't really want to play him in the playoffs, but he's a wide receiver 3. Kayshon Boutte, I don't really want to play as anything more than a wide receiver 4, but he's always a touchdown threat. I think that's it. I mean, Mac Hollins was also on the list. He's been kind of disappointing. At tight end, you got Hunter Henry. I mean, the Ravens are literally the toughest matchup for tight ends over the last 8 weeks when you adjust for schedule, which is extra important to do for tight ends because schedule is very important for the position. Because if you play like George Kittle and Trey McBride, that's obviously going to be a tougher matchup for the defense than if you play like these teams that don't even use the tight end. But Henry's probably like a high to mid tight end 2. So yeah, I don't know if you really want to play any receivers. So it makes me question if Drake May can have a great game, but he probably will. He'll probably at least be steady. And then on the Ravens side of things, Lamar is a good start. He's a top 5 option. Patriots are kind of middle of the pack against quarterbacks over the last 8 weeks. It hasn't been great for Lamar since he came back, but last week they were winning by so much. He only threw 12 passes. He went 8 completions, 150 yards, and 2 touchdowns, 2 for 26 on the ground. The week before that, though, against Pittsburgh, he had a better game than what he had been showing. So if you have him, you're probably starting him. If you wanted to play like Brock Purdy or Dak Prescott over him, you know, given that Lamar has been a little kind of slow coming back from his injury most of that time, I wouldn't blame you, but it's hard to put Lamar on the bench, especially in a game that has nearly a 50-point over-under. And then Derrick Henry, you're probably playing him, but the Patriots are the 6th toughest matchup over the last 8 weeks. He's still a low running back 1, high running back 2, but last week a little disappointed by the usage, especially in a game that they were dominating. I wonder if like they were up by so much that they were just like, you know what, let's save them. We don't need to do too much here. We'll get Keaton Mitchell involved. But in a game they won 24-0, Henry was only 11 carries, no targets. But he did take those 11 carries for 100 yards. So other than scoring a touchdown, that's about as good as you could ask for only getting 11 carries. And then at wide receiver, Zay Flowers is in play as a wide receiver 2. Hasn't shown a lot of upside this year. Patriots are they're an okay matchup. Nothing, not great, not bad. But actually the last 2 weeks, Zay Flowers has been pretty solid. So 3 for 68 and a touchdown last week on 5 targets. The week before that, 8 for 124 on 11 targets. And he was disappointing, only 2 for 6 against the Bengals. Had negative fantasy points in that game, but he did see 7 targets still. So he's an okay start, not a must start, but he's an okay wide receiver 2. And then at tight end, these guys really disappointed against the Bengals last week, so it would be very fantasy football for Mark Andrews and or Isaiah Likely to pop off here. But you probably don't have to start them. Over the last 8 weeks, the Patriots are the 6th best matchup for tight ends. Andrews likely probably not playing them, but wouldn't shock me if one of them caught a touchdown. So that's the Sunday night game. And then finally, Monday Night Football, we got the 10-4 San Francisco 49ers traveling to take on the 8-6 Indianapolis Colts and Phillip Rivers and the boys. That should be fun. So Anthony Richardson was a limited participant on Thursday. He's missed time at quarterback for the Colts. Obviously, Daniel Jones was a starter, tore his Achilles, out for the year. They signed Phillip Rivers, the 44-year-old Rambaugh. So if Anthony Richardson is active, he's got like an orbital injury, kind of a freak incident earlier in the year. I don't know if they're going to probably not start him this week. Maybe if Phillip Rivers is terrible, maybe they look to Richardson. But yeah, they opened his 21-day practice window. So yeah. And then Sauce Gardner, cornerback, is questionable. So I hope he doesn't play for my Juwan Jennings start. But they're fighting for their playoff lives still. So they took the Seattle Seahawks down to the wire last week. Then for the 49ers, Ricky Pearsall, mentioned him earlier. He's questionable at wide receiver. So Brock Purdy, we'll start with the 49ers, is a really good start. God, my computer, every time I click anything, it's just like so slow. But Colts are, especially if Sauce Gardner is out, it's a decent matchup. 46.5 point over under. 49ers are 5.5 point road favorites, by the way. So Purdy is, he's a top 6 play this week. I'd probably play him over Burrow and Goff. Him versus Brissett is like, they're he's probably in that tier actually, with Dak, and yeah, he's a good start. Running back, you're starting McCaffrey, obviously. At wide receiver, Juwan Jennings, he's my start of the week. Decent matchup, especially if Sauce is out. I don't want to start Pearsall or Kendrick Bourne or Demarcus Robinson, but those are the other guys. And then Kyle Pitts. Why do I keep calling George Kittle Kyle Pitts? That's like the second time I've done that. I might have caught myself before I said it last time, but I thought it. You're starting, unless you have Trey McBride, you're starting George Kittle. And then for the Colts, the whole offense takes a hit with no Daniel Jones. I know it's fun to have Phillip Rivers back, but even in that game last week, you could just tell he had pretty much no zip on the ball. Like, he's like 44 years old. It's a really fun story, and I would love for them to get the win and make the playoffs and win the Super Bowl with Phillip Rivers. That'd be awesome. But Yeah, he just turned 44 on December 8th. Happy belated birthday, Phillip Rivers. But, you know, the 49ers don't have a great defense. I wouldn't be starting Phillip Rivers, but, you know, if you want to do a DFS thing or whatever, it's fun. Jonathan Taylor, you're still probably starting him. He's still like a, you know, mid running back 1, especially if they can keep the game competitive. 49ers are, you know, they've had some injuries. They're middle of the pack against running backs, and he's a talented player. Like in my guillotine league, I might not play him, but in most regular leagues, you're gonna probably play him. And then I don't know if I want to start any receivers for the Colts, just because of the quarterback situation. Like Pittman, wide receiver 3, not a lot of upside. He was 3 for 26 on 5 targets last week. Alec Pierce is basically unplayable now with no downfield threat, really. He had 1 catch for 16 yards on 1 target. And then Josh Downs also becomes unplayable. 5 targets, 3 for 13, and a touchdown last week. So if you started him for whatever reason with Phillip Rivers in a tough matchup against Seattle, he still had a pretty bad week, but he had a touchdown. How many passes did Rivers throw? He was 18 of 27, 120 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Okay. And then Tyler Warren, you're probably not starting him. He's a low tight end 1, high tight end 2. If you wanted to play Gadsden or Waller or Loveland or Schultz or Goddard over him, I would for sure play Goddard over him. Probably Dalton Schultz. Probably Colston Loveland. And then if Tua was starting at quarterback for the Dolphins, for sure Waller, but it's a little more of a toss-up there with both tight ends missing their quarterback. Gadsden, if Quentin Johnson is out, gets more interesting, but other than that, Waller's like a high tight end 2, maybe a low tight end 1 start. And those are all of the matchups for the week, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for watching. I appreciate it. As always, remember to drop a like and subscribe to the channel. Good luck to everyone except your opponents in week 16. And I will see you in the next one. Peace.